Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this episode of the Newcastle coming at you on December 11th, 2023. Big up yourself. Hope you're doing all right. My name is Scott, and I am from the niche-case.com here with my comrade, Nicolo. It's like a bit of it's the old Nico Hines. What do you prefer? Nico?
I think because Nico Pennington at the Phoenix as well, is I don't know if you've ever heard him speak, but he just looks like a standard Aussie. He's tall, he's lanky, he's blonde, right? But he's spent most of his life growing up in Italy. So he's very much a Nico, the way that Nico Kerwin is a Nico
Mm.
because he's half Italian and lives in Italy and speaks fluent Italian, same as Nico Pennington used to. So I think that's a little bit too exotic for me. I think I have to be a Nico.
I also don't know how you can be Nico when it's spelled Nicho. Like that's the old
Nico
Nico
Hines,
Hines, but
yeah.
it's like it's not Nico. It's because Nico Kerwin, as you said, is Niko. I imagine.
Yeah.
I think,
I
yeah.
think
So,
Pennington goes by Nico, but it's still the one letter and then the O, The if you add the H in there, it's too strong a sound, surely.
however you want to say it, we're from the niche-case.com where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. What was your favorite thing from the Aotearoa sporting weekend?
Oh, probably a bit of Glenn Phillips. No doubt that's going to be high on the agenda very soon. Yourself? Any favorites other than Mr. GP?
I did enjoy Santner. Can't lie, I do love a bit of Mitchell Santner, but obviously Glenn Phillips, the all-round performance was spectacular. And we've got plenty of Blackcaps information coming up in our podcast today. We'll be touching on the Blackcaps victory over Bangladesh, test victory there. We've got White Ferns and a bit of women's cricket as well. We've got Wellington Phoenix. I was aware last weekend Blackcaps and White Ferns were losing. Wellington Phoenix, fantastic weekend for Wellington Phoenix, and that kind of flipped this weekend where it was a tougher weekend for the Wellington Phoenix. The men had a loss, the women had a draw, but then the White Ferns got their win for the White Ferns sweep where they lose the first two games, win the third game, and the Black Caps had a win in Bangladesh. So it was like the whole weekend, last two weekends we've just had have just been flipped. Phoenix having a winning weekend, Black Caps and White Ferns losing. That flips to Black Caps and White Ferns winning. Tougher weekend for the Phoenix. So I was aware that that was happening.
Well, luckily the Breakers lost both weeks, so at least something stays consistent.
Speaking of the Breakers, let's get some mindfulness.
I don't know. You could probably draw a line between that idea and this mindfulness that I came up. This is one of those ones where how you're saying the other week how you like to listen to the Tao Te Ching as you're falling asleep. I listen to a lot of podcasts as I fall asleep pretty most nights anyway as well. Sometimes they're things that are a bit more like mindful. Sometimes it's just stuff that I can listen to and doze off to. But I was listening to one that was on the mindful side, the Living Myth podcast. Michael Mead is one of my favorites, and he spat some bars at the start, man, and I was like sitting there dozing off, and he said something, and I had to wake up and like write it down so I could remember it for this. And I'm paraphrasing it slightly because it's part of a longer paragraph that doesn't quite make sense for this what do you call it this purpose. But this is from the novelist Graham Greene, who said hatred is just a failure of imagination.
Hatred is just a failure of imagination. As in, if you've got imagination, you can it's going to be easier to find kindness and love, a bit of
Yeah,
creativity.
empathy and sympathy and those kind of things. You just gotta. It's a lack of whether it's willingness or ability. It's a lack of imagination in order to like if you whatever situation you find yourself hating something in, with an open enough mind, you can work your way around that.
I might have to find some Tao Te Ching quotes, which I'm trying to do on the fly right now, but I can do better and actually conjure up. Because what you're saying, like you do hear some stuff. You're like half sleepy, and you're like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
that was a banger." I need to like make sure I remember that. But that's why it's like listening to it over and over again. You're like, you can get they
Mm.
kind of get ingrained in your being. But there are moments where you're like, "Oh, that one really cut through me deep," and that was a gem.
Yeah, the Tao Te Ching is basically just bars on top of bars. So that's that's why I would almost I would struggle to fall asleep to it for thinking of things that just inspire me from that. But then also, I guess that is exactly why you repeat listens, engrave it in your brain. You know, that's the trick there. This one, I knew I wasn't going to remember it if I didn't write it down, so I had to roll over, grab the phone, backlight, brighten up my eyeballs, and keep going. And served its purpose. It was it was a good soldier. It served its purpose. It's given us a nice mindfulness. Hatred is just a failure of imagination.
Beauty. I was like in what you're saying about the bars. It's like Tao Te Ching is just Biggie Smalls. It's just like
Yeah.
Biggie Smalls is my favorite rapper, and it's just boom, 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 boom. Like no bars taken off. It's just banger after banger after banger. Let's explore some niche case matters. So on our website right now, we've got a Blackcaps first test debrief. I did that after the win yesterday. Got a White Ferns T20 International Series wrap and a New Zealand Warriors. Couple of New Zealand Warriors things on the website. I went deep into Kirk Capewell and I did a depth chart. I've also got the 6 sneaky juniors to read about. I actually, one of those pesky things where you forget about someone, you forget something. I did the Warriors depth chart and I forgot about old mate Chanel Harris Tavita. So that was an interesting little situation because I forgot about Harris Tavita. It was like, where does Harris Tavita fit in? Like, is Harris Tavita going to be in the top 17? Because I don't know if he's going to be in the top 17. Like, considering I think the starting team's pretty obvious. And you've got Sean Johnson and Tamaita Martin or Luke Metcalf as your starting half, so he's not going to be there. I don't think the Warriors are going to carry. Like they might go back to carrying a hooker, but I think Freddie Lussick. I love Freddie Lussick. I think Freddie Lussick is a better backup hooker round one than Harris Tavita. The Warriors don't need Harris Tavita to play in the middle because you've got Dylan Walker. You've also got Jazz Tavanga. So I don't know if Harris Tavita is the top 17 forward right now. And I will be using the term small forward, especially for the Warriors, because they've got a few small forwards. You've got Dylan Walker, Jazz Tavanga, maybe Harris Tavita, maybe Kailani going as well. So they've got a few options in that small forward position. And I think the small forward position is going to be something that I'll refer to often. And at the same time, I was like, oh, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's pretty interesting because apparently he's going to be starting centre, which is going to probably bump out Adam Pompey. But I'm a fan of Adam Pompey. I think Adam Pompey is pretty good, but also Ali Leotawa. So you got Ali Leotawa and Adam Pompey, who I think are starting Warriors players in their backline. Pompey can play wing. He's got less vigor than Marcelo Montoya, but he's pretty good and he does the job. And I think he could be a starting winger over Montoya. But then you've got Ali Leotawa, who I wrote in the Kirk Capewell depth chart thing on the website. Leotawa played fullback for SG Ball. He played fullback in junior footy for like representative footy. He played midfield in first 15. He made his NRL debut at centre. He was an absolute monster in the halves for New South Wales Cup, and he can play like every position pretty much. So Ali Leotawa could be a wing option. I don't think he's going to be a centre ahead of Tuivasa-Sheck or Adam Pompey. Is he good enough to be like a number 6 in the NRL? Maybe, I don't know, but it was a bit of a journey writing that Warriors thing, exploring those positional breakdowns, the depth chart, obviously forgetting about Harris Tavita. How do I get Harris Tavita in? I ended up listing him as a dummy half and Leotawa as a wing, but they were like the least confident I was feeling about those things. So that's on the website right now. You've done 2 football things. Anything else maybe on the website or in the newsletter coming up today, the Substack newsletter, the nichecase.substack.com. There's a Monday and Friday edition that we publish that is completely free. What are you thinking? Because you haven't published anything on the website over the weekend, so what are you thinking for your newsletter on Monday?
Well, I've done this Stephen Adams thing that was probably like a month in the in the works, just sitting there as a draft, waiting for ages and ages until I actually came around to finishing that.
Well, there was no rush, right? You had a
There's no
whole
rush because he
season.
wasn't going to play any more games. But I did, like part of it was just like putting a timeline down of his injury, but also I think it ended up the sort of last third of it really highlighting an idea that we talked about on the podcast when he first got injured, is sort of debunking this myth of him being injury prone and realizing after crunching some numbers that he's played like 92% of prior to the current injury, he had played 92% of regular season games and 91% of playoff games in his career, which as a center seems pretty good, especially when you also consider that he had never actually missed a playoff game for injury until last season, like his whole career. And he's made the playoffs most years. He sat out one as a DMP when he was a rookie playing off the bench. He missed some time when when he got benched, I think he only actually missed one game in that Minnesota series a couple of years ago with Memphis. He did get benched, but it's like because he couldn't handle Karl Anthony Towns driving at him from the perimeter. But I think he only missed one game because of that. He usually played like a few minutes off the bench rather than just he wasn't the starter was the main thing. But then he got COVID and he missed some games for COVID. But that was it. Like he never missed a playoff game for injury purposes up until then. And he'd only had like 3 or 4 instances in his whole career where he'd missed more than like 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row. Like when he has missed games, it's usually just 1 game here, 2 games here kind of thing. He's got a bruise on his knee and he needs to rest, or he's, concussion protocols will just sit him out for a couple games, that kind of stuff. And then I also did that Breakers thing. So with that, I think I'm probably in the clear for basketball for a little while. So I think this week is going to be a big focus on Wellington Phoenix and National League teams of the season. So I've worked out my first team, second team, third team for the women's. I'm still in the process of working that out for the men's, but I'm writing those stuff as we go. And I have an idea about the Phoenix Men because it was going to be about how far like ahead of I don't know, they're sort of like I wanted to use the XG numbers because I focused on that a bit last season, looking at how far ahead of in both penalty areas they had been up till the stage. And then on the weekend they got smoked by Newcastle Jets. We'll probably talk about that later, but I thought maybe in hindsight, as I was watching that unfold and sort of when you lose 3-0, there's you've lost with like 20 minutes to go and you're just sitting there watching the game being like, okay, as this unfolds, I'm taking lessons. I'm like, this is digesting now. I'm thinking, well, maybe this performance wasn't so unexpected. Like maybe this was something that was a little bit due, that they were bound to be for a few reasons, for the fact that they were overperforming the XGs, for the fact that they just have generally a young squad that is going to be prone to the odd, just stud performance now and then. Maybe Newcastle Jets have been a little bit of a pesky team for them to play against in recent years. I mean, not maybe, they have been, but they are admittedly under a new coach, so that wasn't necessarily going to transfer, but that's something I want to write about. And then I think probably for the email, I'll save this idea is looking at the women's Phoenix on the weekend with a real funky team that they named, where you had a few of the returning football Ferns not quite fit enough or ready enough to go 90 minutes. So they're sitting on the bench, and that means other players got to fill in for a team that hadn't done a lot of rotating. Marissa Vandermeer's injured for the season. So you had a bunch of players playing in different positions than we've normally seen. And I think I might even, to like format this, I think I might even rank them, or like ranking of players in different positions than we've seen from them so far this season, which are the sort of the ones where like, yeah, this is the go moving forward. Which are the ones where it's like, well, this is an interesting like sort of backup option, and which are the ones where it's like, well, this is just doing a job. Fill in for a one-off game. Someone's got to play this role. This is we need this from you on this day. let's see how it goes. Won't necessarily follow through with this in the future because there were uh, 6, 7, 8 players probably who got minutes in a different spot than we've usually seen them this season, and some of that's quite interesting to like. I don't know to shuffle through to figure out and understand and put into some context. So that is probably going to be what's at least leading my email section today.
You did mention the New Zealand Breakers, and you're still on the money there because they did have a loss to Tasmania, 80-97
Big
on the
loss
weekend,
too.
and they are now second to last. The Breakers, the weird old Breakers, they are second to last, so shout out to them. My newsletter roundup today, I do have a focus on Halibut and Johnston Shield because we've got a pretty funky thing where I think it's pronounced Yssabel Cullen. It's Yssabel. So we're going with Yssabel. She is apparently still at school. Darfield High School, Google suggests. And she is a lefty. So we've got, first of all, she's a funky bowler from Darfield. We've got a lot of those in New Zealand cricket right now. So big up Darfield. They've got Zach Folks, Cameron Paul, and Henry Shipley, all of whom have really funky domestic cricket, Blackcaps skill sets. And now you've got Yssabel Cullen, who, as I said, I think she's still at Darfield High School, and she's a lefty. She took 3 wickets for Canterbury, which means we've now got her, Bree Illing, who's a tall lefty for Auckland, and PJ Watkins, who came over from England. I think she's 19 years old. She's also a lefty for Otago. So you've got a few lefties in the domestic cricket circuit, which is pretty cool. I've got some Ford Trophy stats that I've written down for the Blackcaps lads who are selected in the ODI squad, who have been playing Ford Trophy. So obviously Finn Allen's on fire. Josh Clarkson's scoring a few runs, taking a few wickets. Adam Milne's the best bowler in Ford Trophy. Will O'Rourke is steady as she goes. He's got 6 wickets. Ashok's got some wickets. He's basically averaging high 30s in Plunkett Shield and Ford Trophy, which shows you how difficult it is for a spinner in Aotearoa, because I think he's the best spinner in both competitions, or one of, as far as wickets goes, but he's also averaging high 30s. And Jacob Duffy is going to be interesting for that Blackcaps ODI squad. He's got 2 wickets and an average of 82 to start the Ford Trophy. And given the depth on offer in Aotearoa domestic cricket, especially the seam stocks, Duffy could be an interesting lad because Adam Milne's dominating. He's got no issues. He's like a really good white ball cricketer for the Blackcaps and Wellington. But I've mentioned like Will O'Rourke. I've compared him to Henry Shipley. Henry Shipley and Ben Lister aren't available for the Blackcaps ODI squad, which has opened the way for Will O'Rourke as well as the best players. But if Duffy doesn't take his opportunity, I can see him being overtaken by some of these young seamers who have really unique, quirky skill sets. Not necessarily Zach Folks and Cameron Paul, but I still can't get over this Darfield connection. So anyone listening in Darfield, big up yourself because Darfield's doing some good things, and I'd like to learn more about what's happening in Darfield with the talented cricketers they are producing. We'll also do our subscriber podcast, which we will do on Wednesday. There's 4 trophy games on Tuesday, and then there's 1 Ford Trophy game, I think, in Auckland on Wednesday. So we might chat through some Ford Trophy for the subscriber podcast. We might also just put the focus on domestic cricket. Maybe that's a good opportunity to just really dive into domestic cricket, what's happening there, set up some White Ferns and Blackcaps antics. Anything you want to discuss for the subscriber podcast? Might be a good opportunity to dive into your National League teams, considering I don't know how you're building out 3 National League All-Star teams, but you're doing it. So you might want to talk
10
through
teams
that.
overall, it's doable. Yeah, we could give a sneak preview. I might have even finished the women's one by then. Who knows? Yeah, something like that. I'm sure.
Or we
It's
could,
easily done.
kind of end of year stuff, it might be a good opportunity
Yeah.
as well to really go deep into the state of the All Whites and the football Ferns, because we've touched on it, but I don't think we've really gone in depth into the state of Aotearoa football with the All Whites and the football Ferns. So I think that might be a good space to dive into that.
Yeah, I did in light of, was it no, it was the Thursday podcast, wasn't it? The open one where we started off talking about the football Ferns and just the expanding depth. And for the email on Friday, I worked it out how many players had played for the Ferns this year. And I think I got to in fact, let me check because I have it written down here somewhere. 37, I think it is, 37 different players across 16 games, where the All Whites, incredibly, only played 7 games, well, 7.5, depending on how you want to do it. And I think they got to 33 players. So 33 players in 7, which is, I mean, to be fair, the football Ferns had a World Cup in the middle. So they weren't doing a lot of rotation around that stage. There was a little bit at the start, and there's been a little bit more at the end of the year. But definitely they spent most of the year trying to zone in and like focus their squad around that World Cup sort of 23. But they still managed to give up, caps to 37 different players this year, and the All Whites to 33, incredibly, for only 7 games. Because there was no one in the half game against Qatar who played that game who didn't play in one of the other games. Like, there's no unique players there who missed out. So we're still 33, whether you want to count it as 7 or 7.5 or 8 or whatever. But we'll go with 7 for that reason, because no one's missing out. There's no reason to count that one anyway. Don't ask about the goal scorers, though, for each team. We had a top scorer of 2 in both of them. Matt Garbutt for the All Whites and Hannah Wilkinson for the football Ferns.
Hannah Wilkinson did score for Melbourne City in the Women's A-League, I think. I saw that, which was a good...
They lost, but she did score. It was a lovely header.
Big header. I do think like that 30-player mark is really important, especially for the teams, the sports that have 11 players on the field. Like, so that's cricket and football. But I think you can apply that 30-player mark to rugby league as well, because you've like NRL squads are top 30, so there's an obvious connection. But more so with the international teams, if you've got 30 players in the mix for selection for the Kiwis and Kiwi Ferns, your bases are covered. So I think just that 30-player mark, as far as New Zealand having 30 players for the football Ferns, or like at least 30 players for the football Ferns, or All Whites, Blackcaps, White Ferns, Kiwis, and Kiwi Ferns. Obviously, basketball, you don't want 30, you don't need 30 players because there's less on the court, but I just like that 30-player mark as a sign, an indicator of the depth for these teams.
And most of them are hitting it. I mean, if you go into, like, I guess maybe, not that we spend a lot of time on that, but like rugby union, you'd probably need more closer to 40 because you're going to have, because you use all your subs and you have 15 starters, for example. But yeah, like that, because I also worked out who played the most games for the Blackcaps, just because I thought it'd be interesting in that for the 3 different formats, and that was quite interesting. Like looking at which players were all format players. One of them who wasn't was Kane Williamson. I don't believe he played a single T20 this year, and he won't either, will he? Because he's not. Well, he might come back in for the T20s against Bangladesh, but I wouldn't bet on it. Trent Bolt, I think, also only played ODIs around the World Cup, so that's it's a wee bit more of a concerning one for him down the line. Although I noticed with the Bangladesh ODI squad, it was Trent Bolt made himself unavailable rather than the Blackcaps refused to pick Trent Bolt because of the contract thing. So the wording again there is somewhat encouraging about his spot down the line, but that's why you have a 30-player buffer. You can get away without Trent Bolt in most of these series. Most of them, not all of them.
Speaking of lefties, like there's plenty of lads in the lefty bucket as well, Ben Lister, Ray Toole. I think Ray Toole's going to be an emerging lefty to watch out for. You did highlight the new selector, Sam Wells, and possible semantics around the Trent Bolt. Like I think it was, it might have been for the Test series for Bangladesh. So is that how did you view that updated wrinkle that you just highlighted?
It felt exactly the same. I think both times it seemed like the onus was put on Trent Bolt in the way that it was written. It might not be the way that it happened behind closed doors, but in the way that was made public to us, is that it sounds like it was Bolt's decision rather than the Blackcaps' decision, which, by that logic, if he makes himself available for a test series next time, perhaps he plays. Who knows?
Let's dive deeper into the Blackcaps win over Bangladesh. In my debrief on our website, thenews-case.com, I kind of highlighted three different pockets that I thought were quite interesting. First was the positive selections of Glenn Phillips and Mitchell Santner. There's a lot of negativity around Blackcaps selections, but when you think of the players who were major factors in this game and in the series, it's Glenn Phillips and Mitchell Santner. So selecting Glenn Phillips as an all-rounder for the whole series and then putting Santner into the team for the second game were inspired selections, I believe, and that's a positive thing. We've also got just good bowling. Ajaz Patel took a lot of wickets. Santner and Phillips took wickets as well. I thought Tim Southey was pretty good as a seamer. Kyle Jamieson didn't have to do much, but he was pretty good in what he did do. Then you've got the Henry Nicholls situation, which I wrote as being a little bit more complicated than people believe. We can either roll through each of those things, or you can kind of pick at what you want to pick at there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought if Santner came in, it would have to be for Patel, so it would be a like for like. You'd strengthen the batting, but and you'd give. Well, frankly, we talked about this after the first test. Is Patel wasn't that much better than Phillips or Sodhi in the first test, and his job was to be a lot better. Like those guys were, one's a converted part timer, and the other one is a leg spinner, a wrist spinner, who's automatically going to have less control than a finger spinner. That's just kind of an understood thing. And Patel didn't quite do the job that he was there to do in the first test, which is to tie up an end and just be able to bowl over after over without conceding too many runs, whether he takes wickets or not. But you expect he will take some wickets if he's able to get into his spells like that. And generally with Patel, that's how he's operated at his best. He's not a dude who has a million variations and just spins guys out. He's a workhorse. He gets in there, gets through his overs, and he takes wickets because of the sheer bulk of overs that he bowls, because he's able to string over after over together without the batter getting on top of him. That didn't really happen in the first test. On a much turnier wicket in the second one, a wicket that spun a lot more. He was certainly better to start with, and then fantastic in the last innings. So you could argue he got better and better and better as the tour got on. So fair play. And Santner did what you expect Santner to do. It was a wicket that gave him a lot. It is a rare opportunity for him, and the times in which the Blackcaps would pick two spinners, not very often, and they've sort of come around to a realization now that while Santner did have a little bit of a test career earlier on, just being the guy who didn't necessarily have to bowl, but because he was an okay batter, even though he was only at the very end of his time there in that first sort of extended spell he had, where he finally, turned up and put a big one together. His batting was often one of those things that sort of flatters to deceive. It looks good, and then he didn't get the scores. However, not only did he come in and take some wickets in this game, he did the thing you expect him to do, which is hit his lengths, be like ask questions of the batter with his little variations in speed and angle and stuff and all those things. But with the wicket turning as well, he was able to take some nice, get a few scalps in there. And then he helped win the test with the bat. And I thought that was like, I honestly, the bowling was nice, but the way he batted in the fourth innings, I think, was the most important thing by far that he contributed. Because I think you might have got on a wicket that was turning like that, wickets were falling anyway. It's not like he got the sixth like Ajaz did, but the way in which, the manner in which he approached that was so refreshing, because other guys were trying to bat around, even though they'd seen the blueprint from Glenn Phillips in the first innings, which is that you have to be aggressive against the bad ball. because the good balls are unplayable. So you've got to cash in with runs when you can. And Phillips did a brilliant job of that in the first innings and pretty brilliant job in the second innings as well. He batted fantastically throughout. And it was my number one frustration as I was watching wickets fall in the run chase there is why is Phillips still batting at 7? Like, have you not sent enough information in the first innings to see, well, him, Daryl Mitchell, I think, and Kane Williamson were the three that look like they could handle the spin a bit, or because they're able, Williamson just because he's got perfect eye, and the other two because they're able to be aggressive and get, with Mitchell, good stride forward, get on the front foot. With Phillips, I think he rocks back really well. I think you saw a lot of his runs were coming from cut shots of the spinners, where I think just something about his technique and him not being too tall as well probably helps. He was just able to get low and smack those shots where others were having to sort of defend them. And it worked so well. You saw it work so well in the first innings, and I was like, why is woefully out of form Henry Nicholls? And also, if we're going to say that about Nicholls, kind of got to say that about Blundell, who scored fewer runs this series. Why are these guys coming in ahead of him? Like, I can understand Mitchell, slide Mitchell up to 4, Phillips to 5, and then the other guys coming after that. I didn't know why they weren't. Why wouldn't you just get Glenn Phillips in there for a short run chase as early as you can when you know he's the one guy who's shown he can bat for a little bit of time and score some runs in this wicket? But in the end, they bided their time and won by 4 wickets instead of 6. But it's still got the job done. He did exactly what I hoped he would do, and Santner gave him a perfect ally at a time where there was a bit of a risk there that Phillips might just get stranded. Other guys would get out around him. But yeah, I think I responded to 2 of those ideas, but I'll bring the third one in here with Henry Nicholls, because Nicholls won good in the series. Won good. I can't remember what the stat is, but he didn't pass 30 at any point this thing. So it's still that 200 is the only time he's passed 30 in the last year and a half or something. Can't remember how many innings we're up to there, but it's not been pretty. And these other guys have, the context for that is that he was not alone. And other guys who have been scoring more runs than him and in other conditions, home and away, which counts to their favor, but it's still in the isolation of this Test series. Where are we? I got it written down here. Tom Latham, 51 runs at an average of 12.75. Devon Conway, 47 runs at 11.75. There's your 2 openers. Not a lot of seeing off the new ball to be done there. Although they didn't really need to see off the new ball, did they? Because it just went straight into the middle overs spin starting. Henry Nicholls, 25 runs at 6.25. Tom Blundell, 14 at 3.5. Like, he was worse than Nicholls there. Add those guys together, 137 runs at an average of 8.56. That's 4 of your top. Where are we? 4 of your top 6. Blundell was batting at 6 and Phillips at 7. So there's 4 of your top 6. It's like Glenn Phillips was the top run scorer, 181 at 60.3. 181 runs is considerably more than those 4 got put together with their 137. But even Kane Williamson, he scored 139. That's more than those other 4 put together. So it's not just like the one guy who looked comfortable and did fantastic outscored those guys on his own. Kane Williamson outscored them in a series where he averaged 20 runs below his career average. Like, that's not pretty. And yet the Blackcaps drew the series, getting great, like, from their top 7, getting good, like, above average run scoring sort of capabilities from one guy, and decent to average from 2 others, Mitchell and Williamson, and terrible from 4 others in their top 7. And they drew the series 1-1. There's a glass half full and a glass half empty to look at there. You can take your pick, but a 1-1 draw away in Bangladesh to start a new World Test Championship cycle. It could have been better, but it also could have been a lot worse. I don't have a problem with that result. I got no dramas with the points on the board there. And I'm reminded that when they won the Test Championship the first time, started with something very similar in Sri Lanka, didn't it? Which I think was also coming straight after, like, soon after the ODI World Cup. They lost the first Test, then they won the second Test to draw it 1-1. went on to make the final and win the whole thing. So there's a little bit of history repeating itself there that I like those omens, I like those omens.
And then the context of the World Test Championship, now they have 12 points. So they've got a point percentage thingy-majig of 50%, which is pretty damn impressive. Not in the 2-game sample size that we've got here, because it's exactly the same as Bangladesh, given that they each shared a win in the series. But like, they were near the bottom. Well, they weren't a factor. Yeah, they were at the bottom of near the bottom of the last World Test Championship cycle. Now they're up near the top just based on that win percentage. So if they had drawn this test, it would have been a bummer. But they won the test. So instead of getting 4 points, you get 12 points, which is a major difference. But it also highlights that instead of getting 0 points for a loss, you do want to at least try to get 4 points, because that's going to help you in the long run as well. What you're describing, and I do want to save the Nichols thing because that is worth diving into, but it's a bit of a mind mess, because I thought the best batters were the bowlers. So
yeah, well, I think Southey and Jamieson both outscored outscored each of the openers, which also means those other guys.
Well, yeah,
I have it somewhere. I can look that up.
Tom Latham had 51 runs, but his average was lower than Jamieson. Jamieson had, I don't know where he was ranked, but I thought if you go Phillips, Santner, Southey, and Jamieson, they were all better than the batters in the second test, especially. And if Williamson's looking a bit iffy in those scenarios, like the manner in which Williamson got out, like it's kind of un-Williamson-like. I can't expect Nichols to do anything. Like if Williamson's struggling, it's going to be an issue for Nichols. But then, like, oh shit, Glenn Phillips scored runs, so why didn't Nichols score runs? Why didn't anyone else score runs? Well, for some reason, Phillips, Santner, and Southey found it easier to bat than the batters did. So it's just quite confusing on the mind. You're saying about the technique. I did read something on Crick Info this morning where Phillips was talking about how he wanted to stay leg side of the deliveries. And the commentators mentioned the cut shot a lot. You referred to them as cut shots. The commentators also highlighted how he was playing those deliveries going, yeah, it was back, but it was also get out of the way of the ball and trust your hand-eye coordination. And he was playing those shots with more of a vertical bat. So this goes back to something I noted about Glenn Phillips when we were watching him rise up through Plunkett Shield and Ford Trophy and Super Smash. He hits very awkward shots. Like those shots he was playing to accumulate runs against Bangladesh, they're not cut shots, they're not back foot drives, they're Glenn Phillips shots. And that's Glenn Phillips. And you also mentioned, like, I think the reason why those middle to lower order players were more successful is because they are naturally more aggressive.
Yeah.
So the batters, in all their batting pomp, they're a bit classier. They're a bit more traditional battership. I don't want to say batsmanship, but battership. Whereas the Phillips, Santner, Southey, Jamieson, they're aggressive by nature. They're naughty by nature, so they're going to have a crack. But then there is a difference between being aggressive and hitting out of frustration, which is what Nichols was doing. Like, we can say, oh, you need to be aggressive against the bad ball. Henry Nichols, his dismissals, he was being aggressive, but it looked completely different to Tim Southey's aggression, right? Like, it looked like Henry Nichols was trying to hit out rather than attack the
wasn't
bowler.
Necessarily waiting for the bad ball, but just sort of
attacking the good ball.
Pick a spot, yeah.
But then again, Devon Conway's out of form. Devon Conway has fallen off a cliff as far as test runs goes. He's still averaging like mid to high 30s, but he's not the Devon Conway we saw a few years ago. Daryl Mitchell was all right, but he wasn't at his best. Tommy Blundell was not good. Tom Latham wasn't very good. So I don't want to get too deep in assessing the batting when it was a hard track to bat on for starters, but also the Blackcaps bowlers were really good. So whether it was Ajaz Patel, I did note that Ajaz Patel has joined the group of bowlers with 10 plus wickets this year. So after the first test, I said 5 bowlers had taken 10 plus wickets. Tim Southee was the only one playing in that test. Well, now it's got Patel in a group of 6, and you've only got Southee and Patel as the Blackcaps test bowlers who have taken at least 10 wickets this year. So credit to Ajaz Patel, he was fantastic. I think he, in those conditions, because the thing about Patel that we've highlighted, I think that's more of a him bowling in New Zealand style. Whereas in this series and in the series where the spin is really favourable, he's more of a weapon. So instead of him bowling tight and tying it up, he's the wicket taker. And I think that's what we saw in this test, especially where he can be a bit more expensive, especially because, well, Phillips and Santner were among the most economical bowlers. So they became the tired up bowlers. Southee was a tired up bowler because he didn't concede a bloody run. And then Patel is the weapon. And he did that job pretty well. So credit to him and his wicket-taking mahi. The thing about Nicholls, what's the story of Henry Nicholls as a test batter?
Well, he scores runs at home. He doesn't score runs away. He goes through spells where he doesn't score a lot at all, home or away, and then he gets a big 100 at least once a year.
So Henry Nicholls is really good in Aotearoa and not so good overseas. Where are the next 4 tests being played?
Yeah.
They're in New Zealand, where Henry Nicholls, he averages like 40 in New Zealand. So
better than that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be 48 off the top of my head, but you're going to drop Henry Nicholls, who's really good batting in New Zealand. His whole test career is built on batting in New Zealand. He is one of the best test players, one of the best long-form batters in New Zealand, and you're going to drop him for cricket in New Zealand. That doesn't seem logical. And that's the conundrum with Henry Nicholls, along with the fact that if most of the other batters sucked in this test and the test series, like Williamson was the only dude who did much in the first test. Mitchell also got a 50-plus score. That might have been in the first test as well. So a lot of the batters sucked. Henry Nicholls is aligned with those batters sucking. And now we're going to drop Henry Nicholls for his strength. That's weird. And I think the Blackcaps are a better team if you do get Ravindra in. I think there's a better situation where you give Glenn Phillips a more prominent role, and Glenn Phillips becomes Colin de Grandhomme. Like, I think Glenn Phillips, in these conditions, he was the spinning Colin de Grandhomme. Aggressive, lower order player who can do a job with the ball. I think Glenn Phillips can be the Colin de Grandhomme in Aotearoa as well. I think Glenn Phillips could bat in the top 6 in Aotearoa. So there are those options. I
just said he should have batted in the top 6 in Bangladesh, so yeah, I'm not going to disagree.
As I wrote for the debrief, this is not a passionate defence of Henry Nicholls. I don't really care if he's in the team or not at this stage. I think there's other cricketers who are pretty good. I think the Aotearoa cricket is really good, and there's other cricketers who can do a job. But the whole summary of Henry Nicholls as a cricketer is that he's really good in New Zealand and he sucks overseas. The next 4 tests are in New Zealand. So it doesn't make much sense to drop Henry Nicholls 4 tests in New Zealand when he does average really well in New Zealand. And it's just it's a quirky conundrum around Henry Nicholls, not to mention he hit 2 centuries in the Plunket Shield to start the summer. He had 3 consecutive scores over 50. He had 4 consecutive scores over 40 in ODIs prior to the World Cup, which were in Bangladesh as well. So he is kind of in decent form outside of this test series. But if you're building the best test team for test cricket in New Zealand, statistically, Henry Nicholls should be there.
Yes, I guess. Well, it depends on your angle, doesn't it? Like, are you picking the team that you think is most likely to win in this particular game, or are you picking the team that like sort of has most earned the deserving kind of thing overall? Where like how picky do you want to go? Because yeah, he does. It's not just that he has a great record at home. It's also that he most recently played first class cricket at home. He was still scoring heaps of runs. So you can't even say he's necessarily out of touch, even though he looked
The,
like he had no idea what he's doing for a lot of that Bangladesh series. But then so did Tom Blundell, who was one of our top run scorers last year. So like, yeah, it's about how much in isolation you want to take each of these ideas, I guess. But I
if
would say
you
if I'm Rachin Ravindra coming off that World Cup and I haven't got a chance in Bangladesh and I don't get a chance after Nichols scored 25 runs or whatever it was, yeah, 25 runs in 4 innings, might be a little bit frustrated, but it doesn't necessarily have to come for Nichols as well. Like there's other ways you can build that team.
if you go, so Henry Nicholls scored 200 not out in the last test of last summer against Sri Lanka. So if you
Mm-hmm.
take that innings and then you add it to the start of the Plunkett Shield, he hit 200 not out, he hit 2 centuries, and I think he had a 60 odd as well. So that's 4 innings, 3 scores over 100, and a 50 plus score. Like we can talk about Rachin Ravindra, we can talk about Will Young, we can talk about any other batter from New Zealand who's in that equation, even Glenn Phillips. None of them have done what Henry Nicholls has done in New Zealand either recently or over the course of his career. And again, this isn't a passionate defense of Henry Nicholls. I don't care if he's in the team or not at this stage. He looked frustrated, and we were frustrated watching him. This is just highlighting the conundrum here and the situation of Blackcaps cricket, because like Rachin Ravindra as a long form batter in Aotearoa, like there is a difference between what he's done in New Zealand and what he did at the World Cup. Those are different things. I do think what he did at the World Cup highlights his quality as a cricketer, and maybe he should be in this first 11 for the Test team, but he didn't score any Test runs when he did play Test cricket. He also hasn't like been an absolute monster in Plunkett Shield. Will Young hasn't really dominated Test cricket in New Zealand. So the two lads you want to put into the Test team ahead of Henry Nicholls for Test cricket in New Zealand haven't done, even recently or going further back throughout their careers, they haven't done what Henry Nicholls has done in long form cricket in New Zealand either. Like it's a very strange equation, and we know the Blackcaps aren't going to make swift or dramatic changes. Like you're talking about the batting lineup, they're not going to change the batting lineup like that. Like this is a slow moving Blackcaps team. Love it or hate it, the underdog's on top. Shout out to the old jam. But hate it or love it, the Blackcaps are a slow moving enterprise. Again, you can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can want things to be different. Like this is how we interpret the Blackcaps as an operation. They are slow moving, they are faithful in their players, they give them endless opportunities, and the players have to play their way out of the team or out of the lineup. So I didn't really think there was a chance that they were going to put Glenn Phillips up the order for that series. Like that's not what the Blackcaps do. And I think we saw, because we were suggesting maybe Henry Nicholls drops out after the first test. He played the second test. And if he played the second test, sure, he didn't score any runs, but they also know Henry Nicholls has done a job for them in New Zealand before. So if Henry Nicholls played both tests here, and the Blackcaps know everything I've just said, there's a decent chance Henry Nicholls is in that test team come South Africa test series. Because what will probably happen is Henry Nicholls will play ODI cricket, T20 cricket, Super Smash, Forward Trophy in New Zealand. And if he's scoring runs, I don't think this slow-moving Blackcaps enterprise is going to be like, nah, well, Henry Nicholls, your runs don't matter. It's going to take Henry Nicholls failing in New Zealand while Rachin Ravindra, Will Young, whoever else succeed. It's going to take that little situation for Henry Nicholls to be dropped.
Yeah, he's scored one score over 50, no, one score over 30 in his last 19 test innings, which include a few in New Zealand. You know, that's the rest of that Sri Lanka series. It's the England series before that. Pakistan was away. England was, we don't play enough test matches, clearly. But it's go back his last 11 test matches is a better one. He has batted 20 times and averages 25. That 100 is still the only one over 50 in that span. Like that's let's just say the 200 is doing a lot of heavy lifting there because he has been failing in New Zealand outside of that. But then not many people can score a test match double 100. That's the thing. It might be, I don't know if they're as creative as this, but they do have a new selector in town. So maybe this is something that they're open to. You know, Ajaz Patel basically only plays away games. Like he doesn't play the home games because there's no reason. Well, maybe Henry Nicholls just has to only play the home games because he does average 48. I checked that. You're right. At 48 at home. That's an outrageously good record. That's one of the best ever. The away record, not so good. Maybe he just is a specialist home batter and then you drop him in order to bring in someone like Mitchell Santner when you're playing in the overseas because Santner could potentially bat it 7 or 8 and then Phillips slightly higher and then there you go. You got a couple spinners to go with another one coming in for a seamer. There's your lineup there. You don't have to get frisky with anything. Or maybe Ravindra comes in those situations since he also bowls some spin. There's the home test specialist batter maybe is the ideal role for Henry Nicholls moving forward. But we'll see how that goes because, as you say, there is a home summer coming up, and that's generally the pattern: is he'll come and score 100 in the home summer, and then that's his spots settled for a little while to go. I did see a thing the other day, though. Do you know who the three? This obviously isn't counting guys who are very early, so it's the sort of 3 established players who've, I don't know what the buffer would be, but let's say they've each played at least 5 years of domestic cricket. The 3 highest averages in Plunket Shield who have never played a test match for the Blackcaps of current players.
It's Greg Hay has got to be one because I think there was the yarn you're referring to might have been about.
Yeah, you probably read the same thing. Yeah.
But I can't remember the other names. But I'll have it a guess. Like, they
one
current
of them
players?
You can figure out. Yeah, they're current players. One of them you can probably figure out because he is an average bordering on 50, and the other Ben has played internationals but not test matches. The other one is a surprise who caught me off guard as well.
I'm drawing a blank, so for the purpose of podcasting, I'll just let you answer them.
Well, Tom Bruce is the big Donny there. And then Bharat Popley was the other one, averages a shade over 40, I think, which is, everyone else who's averaged over 40 of current players has played a test match at least. I don't know if that includes Colin Munro, but it might as well include Colin Munro because he played a test and averaged around about 50. So only one test, though, just the one.
Speaking of statistics, who has the highest first-class batting average out of these batters? Henry Nicholls, Tom Blundell, Daryl Mitchell, Rachin Ravindra, and Glenn Phillips.
In recent times, I'd lean heavily on Daryl Mitchell, but I think because he's a more experienced player, the earlier years and when he was batting lower down the order will probably hold him back. I think that might be Glenn Phillips.
It's definitely Glenn Phillips, averaging 42.39 in first-class cricket. Daryl Mitchell's the only other lad over 40. So Henry Nicholls, 39.34. Daryl Mitchell and Glenn Phillips, they all have better first-class averages than Rachin Ravindra. Blundell's on 37. And Mitchell Santner, shut up, big Santner. Santa, slink. He's averaging 30.9, which is really impressive for someone like him down the order. Although when he's batting for Northern, he's often up the order, which is always a fun quirk of domestic cricket. Just quickly on White Ferns, who start their ODI series against Pakistan. This is going to be fascinating because they're coming off that T20 International Series loss. This year in ODI cricket, the White Ferns are 2-4, 2 wins, 4 losses. And I was like, is that a recent thing, or is this White Ferns woes that I talk about all the time? Is that actually real? Shock horror. Is what I'm saying actually real? Because sometimes I talk a load of jibber jabber. I think I made a really interesting case about Henry Nicholls, but it also feels like jibber jabber at the same time as a compelling case. But the White Ferns since 2019, they're 10-15 in ODIs. So they're just a losing ODI team. And now they're playing ODIs against Pakistan. And that's going to be pretty interesting considering what happened in the T20 International Series. The White Ferns have 3 bowlers who have taken 5+ wickets this year. It's not a lot. Leah Tahuhu, Sophie Devine, and Hannah Rowe have all taken at least 5 wickets and averaging below 30. Then you've got Eden Carson, Amelia Kerr, Fran Jonas. So again, spin guru Craig Howard working wonders here because Carson, Kerr, and Jonas have taken either 3 or 2 wickets, and they're all averaging over 50 in ODI cricket this year. Jess Kerr, she's got 2 wickets and an average of 41. Again, spin guru Craig Howard, he's been working wonders with Susie Bates as a spinner. She's bowled 4 overs at 7.75 RPO this year. As far as the batting goes, Amelia Kerr, best batter in the team. She's averaging 75 with 377 runs. Her and Sophie Devine are the only batters averaging over 40 in ODI cricket this year. And Devine, she's only got 1 score over 50 in 6 innings, and that was a century. So she scored 137 of her 241 runs in 1 innings. So she hasn't had a great year, but it looks good. But also she wasn't
some Henry Nicholls numbers, eh?
Yeah, these are Henry Nicholls numbers. So I got to chill out and just let them simmer. Susie Bates averaging 23 with a strike rate of 59. Which is completely aligned with her low T20 strike rate. She did have a knock in that last T20 International against Pakistan. And then you've got other highlights such as Maddie Green, averaging 22 with no 50+ scores. Georgia Plummer averaging 13 with no 50+ scores. Bezodenhout averaging 14 with no 50+ scores. Safe to say the White Ferns aren't a very good ODI team. Now they're playing ODI cricket after losing a T20 International Series in Aotearoa against Pakistan. It's kind of like put up or shut up time for the White Ferns, to be honest. Like, if they capitulate in this ODI series, then we're like, holy cow, what's going on? Was the niche case right about their perception of the White Ferns cricket? But if the White Ferns bounce back in this ODI series and they are dominant, at least that's something they can build on throughout the rest of the summer. Because I think England's coming to Aotearoa to play the White Ferns this summer. And if the White Ferns lose to Pakistan, that's going to set up a... might not be so good against England. And if they defeat Pakistan and they perform really well, it might give them some confidence to go into that series against England and actually play good cricket. So it's I think that's a really fascinating series, and especially because you've got Super Smash cricket, which is the most visible form of cricket, so everyone's going to be able to watch the young talent coming through with the White Ferns. And I do think the young players in domestic cricket are really, really good. Same with the men. Same with every other sport we talk about, to be honest. Like I mentioned, Curran, the lefty, she's pretty good. Saffron Wilson scored a century for Otago. 2nd century of the Halliburton Johnston Shield after Georgia Plummer scored a century for Wellington. You've got like fringe White Ferns. Lee Casbrick I think she's 3rd for runs and 5th for wickets. She took 5 wickets in a game over the weekend. Rosemary Mayer, she didn't have a mare. She took 6 wickets for Central Districts. She's a fringe white fin. She's pretty good. And then,
That includes 4 in a row at one stage, eh?
yeah, double hat trick. She took a double hat trick, and Natalie Dodd took an amazing catch as well off her bowling. Who are some other great young cricketers in Aotearoa right now? Natasha Wakelin, young batter for Northern Districts. Kate Chandler, I think she's 17 years old. I think Wakelin's 17 years old. Kate Chandler's a leggy who's also really good at batting. Izzy Sharp, 19-year-old, powerful hitter for Canterbury. I also like the look at Jodie Dean. She's a young all-rounder for Canterbury. Auckland, Amy Hucker, Prue Catton, football extraordinaire. She doesn't score many runs, but she's a captain of Auckland at a very young age, which is always a good sign. And if you're looking for a young spinner, Jaswell, leggy for Auckland, she's pretty good as well. Marama Downs took 4 wickets for Northern Districts. There is a lot of young talent coming up through the domestic cricket scene that I heading into Super Smash, because that is the major storyline of domestic cricket at the moment. Ford Trophy finishes on Wednesday, and I think we've had the last round of HBJ Shield. So now we move into Super Smash cricket, where everyone can watch on TV these fantastic young cricketers. Like, folks are going to be able to see Zach Folks. They're going to be able to watch Ben Lockrose for Otago, Will Clark for Central Districts, Matt Fisher and Christian Clark for Northern Districts, maybe some Ashok for Auckland. There's a lot of good young cricketers in Aotearoa that we highlight all the time for Plunkett Shield, HBJ Shield, Ford Trophy. We've got a lot of clips about them. Now you can see them playing Super Smash on the tele and have fun watching them.
There were, just quickly before we move on, there were 3 things that stood out from the White Ferns sweep game on the weekend for me. One was the convenient / explanatory, depending on how you want to view it, injury for Sophie Devine, who we'd mentioned had been not scoring runs, fielding awfully, and then just generally not looking like herself. Although she did get a couple wickets, I think, in the first couple. And considering no one was taking wickets, that's still a factor. Then they sort of said, she's been struggling with, I think it was like a knee injury or something, and we're just going to rest her for this game, and then the White Ferns win. So you take her. You could either look at that as, well, she's struggling because she's been injured. That's why she's not moving well in the field. And that would make perfect sense. You could also look at it as like, we want to give a key player a rest without embarrassing them, so we say there's an injury kind of thing. But she will be in the ODI squad, won't she? So we'll see how she looks there. Hopefully a bit of game off will help. Matters. The other one obviously was Susie Bates scoring a 50 as soon as it was a much needed innings, and it was a match winning innings, and she delivered in a game which was 2 games too late, but at least it happened. And then the third one was that Amelia Kerr, under her own captaincy, took some wickets, and that there's a notable sign in itself as well. And seen that so often, but I think Threefer and bowling, she always bowls economically, but here she was ripping through as well, which was good to see as the first of probably many times that she ends up captaining the national team down the line.
There is a difference between Amelia Kerr, the ODI bowler, and Amelia Kerr, the T20 bowler. T20 bowling this year, she's got 12 wickets, one of 3 players with at least 10 wickets, averaging 19, strike rate of 20.9. ODI cricket, as I said, she's got 3 wickets, averaging 77.66, 4.9 RPO, strike rate of 95.
So the test is yet to come, really.
Correct. Mentioned earlier a tough weekend for the Wellington Phoenix. We'll start with the men, and I am curious what went wrong for the men, because when we were talking on Thursday, it did feel like, we talked about it, Newcastle went very good. They were near the bottom of the ladder. and then they come out and smoke the Phoenix in Wellington. Hot take. I'd like to see the Wellington men play at Aotearoa Park. To be honest, I think that will be a situation, and I think if you can get a double banger, men and women, at Aotearoa Park, that would be awesome. But what went wrong for the Phoenix in their loss to Newcastle?
Yeah, I actually tend to agree with that idea as well. I like the Aotearoa Park experience. It sounds way louder than it should for the size of crowd that you can fit in there, but the size of crowd that you can fit in there is not too dissimilar from what they get at Sky Stadium anyway, which when you only have a small crowd there, it just sounds echoey and it's not the same. And I don't know, I sort of alluded to this at the start. I think there's an element of a day like this was coming at some point for them where just like, Alex Paulson made a mistake for one of the goals where it's a cross where he was a little bit unsighted, but he spilt it and they finished it off. I think that might have even been the first goal. And Lucas Kelly-Heald wasn't as good as solid as he has been in other ones, and the defense weren't clearing their lines the way they have been. I think Alex Rufer had a lot of trouble. I thought Alex Rufer was still fairly good in this game, but you could definitely, in the latter stage of the first half, you could see like the foul count was rising. And some of that was a little bit unfair against him, but also like that's the line you walk, is that there might be some games where a referee's calling those 50-50s against you. And if you play that way and you pick up a yellow card in the first half, you're on your tippy toes the rest of the way. Like Savada limping off at one point, and then just the dumb things like conceding within 5 minutes of kickoff and then conceding straight away in the second half. I think it was the penalty, giving away a penalty like a minute into the second half when you've just had a big old chat about like, okay, we're 2-0 down half time. It's all right. We've created a lot of chances. We've probably created more than they have. Let's see if we can like the transitional attacks are still there the way they are in these other games. That's what we've been built off of. Let's just put a couple of them away, is get the first goal and see it, and then you go and concede a penalty within 60 seconds or whatever it was at the start. Like, it's just one of those games with nothing really went right for them. And yet, if I look at the old statisticos here, 62% of possession, 17 shots compared to 11, 5 shots on target compared to 4. More corner kicks than their opponents, more offsides than their opponents, also more fouls, but that was part of what I mentioned. Like the hit the woodwork at one stage. Like the game wasn't what it feels like to just look at the scoreboard. Like it was the kind of thing where if you didn't concede at just really inopportune moments, the start of both halves, if you've been a little bit sharper at putting some of those chances away that they created. But then I also like this has felt like one of those things where Zavada carries them with a lot of his goals. The shots weren't going to Zavada in this game. They were going to other guys. And I've mentioned before how David Ball and Costa Barbarosas just don't want to shoot. Like this, they know they're not great finishers, but they've been really good at setting things up this season, especially Costa, who I think already has 3 assists to his name. Like they've found work-ons to build around what was not working for them last season. They found ideas like I don't know, different passages, different like escape routes out of the castle or whatever. They've found solutions to problems that they had, but that didn't mean that the problems have necessarily gone away so much as they've just been bypassed, I think. And then in a game like this highlights some of those things. The risks of having young dudes in your defensive line and guys who aren't great finishers in your attacking line. Like just some of that stuff, you're walking a little bit of a tightrope in order to perform that way. And they've been going so well and so much ahead of what some of the stats suggested. And some of that is on purpose. They've set up a way of being a team that doesn't necessarily create more chances than their opponents during games, but their idea is they can create better chances. So one team has 10 shots, but 10, say once their opponents have like, I don't know, 20 shots in a game, but 7 or 8 of them are from outside the box, 3 or 4 of them are blocks. Like they're not necessarily high percentage chances. couple headers from difficult positions that go off target or sort of thing. Whereas the Phoenix might have 10 shots, but 2 of those are like one-on-ones, and or a square ball across goal shooting from 12 yards out or something like that. Like fewer chances, but better chances. It has been a bit of the formula. I think Chiefy kind of said this, and I try to find the quote for when I write about them. He kind of said this and not as specific words, but he pretty much alluded to that this is the idea: is we're not a team that necessarily feels like they have to go out there and just shoot for the fun of it. They have ways of how they want to score goals, and they're going to go through those processes, through those motions, and not break things. And a lot of that stuff was still working. Like Tim Payne was getting in some great positions in this game, and he was putting in crosses, and Costa Barbarouses was running well and setting things up. It's just it wasn't working for them. And I guess the bottom line is that it's just one of those days. But I think it was one of those days that had been forecasted a little bit to where, like, eventually their luck was working very well for them. Eventually that was going to, at some point, they were going to have a game like this where things just didn't click and they didn't get the rewards for what they've been doing. But that's also reason to think that, all right, well, that was the bad week. Next week will be better. You know, this isn't the team that they are. This is just this is the low point, and next week there's no reason why they can't bounce back. I do think they have had some tricky results against Newcastle in recent years. So for whatever reason, maybe they're just also a little bit of a bogey team for the Phoenix.
You mentioned the kind of lack of shots, but within a system, within their process. I was watching the Wellington Phoenix women. They had a decent result, like a 2-2 draw. And I need to see some more shots. You know, like, there's this thing with the Wellington Phoenix women. I think it's a very interesting football team. We've talked about the small ball thing before. Is that what it's called? Yeah, small ball.
Yeah, small ball.
And, well, I'll stick to the shots thing. Like, watching the Wellington Phoenix, you just want them to fire off some shots. Like, at least just, instead of the intricate passing in those tight areas around the goal, just bang a shot. Because I think in that league, if you put the shots wide of the goalkeeper, there's a decent chance those shots are going to go on the back of the net.
Or you get the situation for the goal where Kelly Brown shoots from outside the box, kills it off the crossbar, and the main follows it up and scores. You know, that's one of those exact situations you're talking about, was how they scored one of their goals.
And you could the thing about that Aotearoa Park is you could hear the crowd just being like, shoot. And they did it a few times in the first half, and then you come into the second half and you're like, please shoot. Someone shoot. Like, just bang it at the goal. But the Wellington Phoenix, women's team, they're a very interesting team because they've got this style of football that works for them. And I'm curious to see how it plays out over the course of the season, because I felt like that wasn't the best representation of the way they play their football against Melbourne Victory, I think it was, where a lot of, and they talked about in the commentary, where there are a few new combinations on the team which can hinder the way they play their football, similar to the Warriors, because the Warriors, it's all about that real crisp shape, and everyone's running a decoy. You've got passes on point and so on and so forth. If you've got a couple of players who are new to that combination, it's going to be harder to execute those shapes. And that's what you saw with the Wellington Phoenix women, where they're trying to play real intricate passing and move into space, quick decisions that can look a bit off or a bit disjointed if the players aren't really connected and you lack a bit of chemistry. Part of that is defenders bursting forward. And that left back, McMeekin, some of her touches were utterly sublime. Like, to the point where you're like, okay, you maybe didn't need to do that extravagant maneuver, but you did it and it looked cool and you got into space. So shout out to you. But she did it a few times where no matter, like, she found herself all across the park, and no matter where she was in the park, she was going to move into space, which is good. Like, that's how the Wellington Phoenix play their footy. I also think it's a bit of the Bazball situation where these players don't have fear about the repercussions of like the whole system is designed where the players are encouraged to play this way without the repercussions that many old school kind of football coaches would drill into them. Or like the cricket thing, like, why'd you play that bloody shot? What are you doing? Don't you understand the situation? Blah, blah, blah. No, just
sort it out, Henry Nichols.
Yeah, just play your shots, mate. Like, have a bit of fun. Go out there and do what you do. So my point here is defenders are moving into space, and that's great. That's fantastic. But it takes a defender out of the defense, and that happened a few times. I think I said it a few weeks ago where I think it might have been after the other game at Aotearoa Park which they won. And it was like, well, I enjoy the attacking side of this, but there's also a lot of holes in the defense because whether it's the left back McMeekin, who was the right back? It wasn't
Hayley Davidson.
Yeah, Davidson.
The usual right back. She's started every game, I think.
So either of them can burst forward, but then one of the centre backs might take an opportunity to move into space. And that's great. Again, you don't want to have fear, but I do think there needs to be some approach within the system to ensure that you do have defenders defending. Because I think it might have been the setup for the second goal that Victory scored, and it might have been the Japanese or Korean player, excuse my ignorance, but she got in behind the defensive line and she fired off a shot. It was a great shot. She beat the goalie. Fantastic. But she got into that position. Someone had whipped in a ball from the left and it was basically 3-on-3. Like there were 3 Victory attackers attacking the space in behind 3 Phoenix defenders. It's like that's how the Wellington Phoenix concede a lot of their goals, I reckon, is just there's holes in behind the defense and there aren't always good numbers defensively to stop the opposition. And that stems from players moving forward. And I don't necessarily want to stop the players moving forward, but you do need to have some sort of system that ensures that you've always got good numbers defensively. Because like the Wellington Phoenix women are a fun team to watch. I enjoy watching the Wellington Phoenix women because of the way they play their football. And they are good defensively. Like I think the goalie's pretty good. I think they get in, they block shots, they make crucial tackles. Great tackling team. Mackenzie Barry, the other centre back was
depends when you're talking about
the Canterbury
the
player.
other centre back has been versus
they're both from
3 Canterbury players you could be talking about.
But the
Barry and Vandermeer have been the main centre backs, but now Vandermeer did her ACL with the football Ferns, so it's probably going to be Rebecca Lake.
Rebecca Lake. Kate Taylor's playing centre defensive midfielder, so that not having her in that position could also hinder their defense in this game because she's usually protecting the back 4. But then Rebecca Lake, she's a good tackler as well. Kate Taylor's a good tackler. Like these are good tacklers. I think they put in good defensive efforts. I think they're actually a decent defensive team. But when they concede goals, it's usually from these situations where there is space. Like they have been exposed for their attacking prowess.
Attacking like courage or bravery, I guess, because the prowess means you end up with a good chance in the end of it. If they're counter-attacking through you, then you probably didn't end up with a good chance. And yeah, I think that is definitely a lot of opportunities against them have come that way. I think they've gotten lucky on a few occasions against some teams with some of the finishing in those situations not being up to scratch. Although I think I can't remember her first name, but it was Aquino. She's Japanese, the winger you're talking about. Her finish, even though the goalkeeper was out of position, her finish for the equalizer was top notch. Like there was a tight angle and you had 3 defenders getting back, and I sort of felt like Kate Taylor she shapes up to like block the sort of so that she can cover the cross or the shot. I'm thinking like just go to the near post, just block the shot, and if she cuts it back, then you've got 2 other defenders plus a recovering goalie. It's let them deal with it. But that's this kind of stuff that can happen in transitional defense. That's the whole point of those situations, is you're getting a team out of their usual shape. Like things are disorganized. That's why you want to create those moments. And yeah, I do think the Phoenix leave themselves vulnerable to some of that. McMeekin is a fascinating one. Like, I'm glad you mentioned her because she has been with the team since day one. But when they signed her at first, she hadn't really even played anything other than maybe like two substitute appearances at National League level. She was pretty much a National League youth team player. So she was signed very early and signed for obvious reasons. She's an insane athlete. Like, she's to the point where she was like a Canterbury representative at athletics. Like, you Google her name, you'll find some stuff from her for doing like high school age athletics stuff, but wasn't really ready for the A League in the first season. The second season didn't get many minutes as a result. Like, the first season, she played a lot because they were like leaning on the under 20 players, and they weren't, you know, not to rehash that again, but they didn't necessarily pick the best players for that first season. They treated it as a development year, like a sort of soft launch into the A-League. Second year, as a result, is trying to ramp things up. McMeekin doesn't play much. She does this year now. She's dropped to a scholarship deal. So she wasn't a full deal. Now she's on a scholarship deal. But she has benefited massively from being able to play a lot, including under Paul Temple at the start of the year, specifically for the reserve team. And she was of all the first team players, she was the one who played the most in the National League this year, always at left back. And in a fascinating way, to where like the first couple of years in the A League, it kind of felt like she wasn't as in control of her athleticism. Like, she just had she was still growing, you know, she's talking about a 17-year-old maybe when she was first playing, and didn't necessarily look like she had the kind of tactical awareness. So maybe that's just the pace of the game was gone past her. But it's also, I think, just not being a player who, like many of the others who have come in, like the players who have had significant National League experience, being one of the better players in their position in the National League in New Zealand, who have then gone on to A-League in the last few years, have settled in pretty quickly. Like, Devin Jackson's immediately getting mostly off the bench, but and Ruby Nathan, both of them playing for Canberra most games. Rebecca Lake hasn't seemed to need a ramp up period or anything like that. She's played in every game. This was her first start, and lose absolutely nothing having her in there. Like, players like this who have had at least a season of being one of the dominant players in the New Zealand National League have been able to make that step up a bit more. McMeekin didn't get that, so I think she just needed more time. But what you saw from her in the reserves team this year was a lot of what I was wondering whether we would see it here or not, but I figured you probably would, because I don't really see why you'd go super tactical funkiness for National League if it wasn't something you're working on for the first team. And so what you see from her is a lot of inverted things, to where she was playing at left back, but she was hanging out in the midfield, and she wasn't afraid to make a run all the way to right wing or something to follow the ball to close someone down. She did these things for the Phoenix against Melbourne Victory. There was times where she was hanging out on the right wing, and it's like, well, you're a long way away from where, if they counterattack here, from where you want to be, but also like everywhere you go, you're creating an overload. And the idea, I guess, is if it works, they don't counterattack, you create a good chance. It's sweet as. But also, if the fullback's going to leave their position, you hope that at least a defensive midfielder can slide and cover or something like that. And yeah, I think you make a very good point about them not having Kate Taylor's mobility in that spot. Annalie Longo was covering there, but she's not someone who's going to dive into tackles in the same way. She's more an on the ball kind of presence. So you had three quite attacking players there without that defensive balance necessarily. And I think that was something that you definitely could notice from them in that game, is they didn't and that's, I think, also why the shot tallies were a bit more skewed towards Victory. Is I think while the Phoenix had slightly more ball, I think Victory probably dominated a lot more of the territory in the moments that mattered. Like, I don't think the Phoenix were able to set up camp the way they would have liked to. And they had a few pot shots from deep, like the Kelly Brown one was important. I was looking at the shot chart somewhere here, if I can find it again. And yeah, there were 4 shots from inside the penalty area all game, which is a pretty good, like, shots from outside the penalty area, you're rolling the dice. Shots from inside the penalty area, you sort of thinking you've got a decent chance to score. 2 of those were the goals. One of them was the header from Rebecca Lake right near the end, which I think was blocked. So didn't quite threaten. But then the other one was the Speckmeyer one-on-one with about 5 minutes to go, which I really thought they were going to score that one, and then she couldn't beat the goalkeeper. But great ball from Melissa Winham, who's popping back up for her most second appearance of the season. But yeah, the Zoe McMeekin thing is funky because that's she just looked like a completely different player to what she was in the first couple, and there's a confidence there. There's something she's found to set herself aside from other players, which is that mobility, her athleticism. She can cover so much ground. Her touch looks a lot better, which I guess is just going to happen when you've had 3 years playing in a professional environment. And I don't think we have seen, because it was something I was expecting to see a bit more of. Michaela Foster's not really that quick, so that she's not necessarily someone who's going to overlap. Hayley Davidson, I thought, would be more so, but neither of them really do rush forward. They tend to be like support players rather than overlapping gambling kind of runs. So McMeekin there offers something different as well. And we actually saw Foster come on not for McMeekin, but to play in that CDM role, to be someone who could give them a little bit more just sort of defensive presence there, and did a decent job. The thing about Michaela Foster is she's played pretty much predominantly as left back for the Phoenix and for the national team. Little bit of left wing, very early days for the Phoenix. But before that, National League level, she could play anywhere, like any position. I'm saying the only position I've not seen her play is goalkeeper, and I'm sure she could probably do that too. Just the opportunity hasn't arisen. She started one. She was one of a couple players. Her and Chelsea Elliott, who's actually her fiance, I believe, played in 2 Kate Shepherd Cup finals in the same year last year. It must have been last year. So there was the 2021 version that was delayed until the start of 2022 because there was a COVID lockdown. Elliot and Foster both played that final for Hamilton. Foster was a centre back in that game. About 8 months later, she's playing in a Kate Shepherd Cup final for Northern Rovers, having transferred, and she's playing as a right winger. And she's also playing mostly in the subsequent National League as a attacking midfielder, so sort of centre mid, but on a little bit more of an attacking band. Then she's playing left back for the Phoenix, where she often played as a fullback in college football and for the YBOP team back when there was still a YBOP team. So she's played striker for Rovers as well. Like, she basically can play any position on the field. So not surprising to see her get a go at CDM. But yeah, there are a lot of examples of the Phoenix players playing in different positions to where they normally have in this game, and I think one of the ones that worked least effectively was having Hope Breslin as a center midfielder, because I think you got with her playing center mid but trying to still be a winger. And the stuff you said about McMeekin, I was also thinking about that of Breslin and then some, where it's like, yeah, nice trick, but maybe that's not the place to be doing that. Or maybe don't go dribbling past that extra defender when you're taking away an option to pass to someone else and then running down a blind alley to where you can't get out of there. Like, you're just going to lose the ball eventually. That kind of stuff happened a lot. So, but for a Phoenix team that was shuffling through a lot of players in different combinations against a contending team, it was at home, but a 2-2 draw, I think, is a pretty solid result there, and definitely a fair result on how their game unfolded as well. So, I'll take that. A lot better than how the men's went.
You missed out the bit where, whether it was Hope Breslin or someone else, like, maybe don't try dribble past 3 people on the edge of your own box. Like, maybe save that for the other box. Yeah. Like, there was a few times where
specifics. Yeah.
The attacking razzle dazzle football flowed into trying to exit defensive positions. It was like, maybe just get the ball out of here and then we'll try the razzle dazzle down the other end of the field. In the niche case, equal parts grit, grind, defensive organization as we are razzle dazzle. So big up yourself. We'll be back on Wednesday with a subscriber podcast, Thursday with another niche cast. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, cheer cheer.